Welcome to the Educators Among Us podcast, where we share motivational messages and inspiring stories for and about educators. Your host, Scott Barron, is author of the critically acclaimed book, Love 'Em and Lead 'Em, and provides powerful insights and wisdom for those who heed the call to teach, coach, lead, and serve at all levels of education.
Hey, this is Scott Barron with School Growth, and welcome to the Educators Among Us podcast. And this is a different program because we get to do an interview. We get to talk to some educators who really are they're making just a tremendous difference. Of course, most educators do, but some are even more distinct and in their leadership and where they're making a difference and how they're doing it. And the joy of our work is we get to talk to people like that. I mean, imagine that. How cool would that be if that was your job? That's the joy of my work, and I love it. Absolutely love it. And so that's what we're doing today, is sharing some perspective. You know, that's the purpose of Educators Fellowship, is to provide perspective, encouragement, and even maybe some inspiration that would go, okay, I get it. Yeah. And because this is hard work, and we recognize that, but it's not just hard work. It's a noble calling. It's an exciting thing to be a part of. And so that's the purpose of Educators Fellowship, is to do that and provide that guidance and input for, again, a wide range of educators in all different sectors and age levels and roles. Education is a big space. And so we're thankful for all those people who've served in professional roles and in volunteer roles to make it happen, because we get to change lives. So thank you for that. Hey, one of the things we're talking about today is transformation. And that's a term that is used a lot in talking about schools and the impact of schools. And it's kind of used a bit loosely, I would say, because we've seen some people talk about transformation. And I'm not sure it's really transformation. Maybe some more subtle words could be used. But anyway, today we're talking to Dr. Amy Swann. And she's a great friend who I've known for about a dozen years, and just have seen her and her work in both in private education, in public education, as well as in charter schools and doing inner city school turnarounds, and just being a thought leader across a wide spectrum of educational issues. And so, Amy, thank you for joining us for this conversation today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Scott. It's great to be here. I love what you guys are doing with Education Fellowship and School Growth. It's incredible. Helping to grow the people that are growing schools is such important work.
Yeah. And just, kind of the joy of being able to see educators grow and maybe sustain that fire. Man,
yeah.
It's a joy, right? And I know that's what you've been doing, because when you think about sort of your journey as an educator, I would love to, and even as a student, right? One of the questions that we love to ask is, who is an educator that significantly impacted your life, and why?
The first one that comes to mind is not the positive one that everybody else says. So the first educator that comes to mind is my second grade teacher. My second grade teacher, she sometimes would have my name on the board before I even got to school. And she actually would call me stupid in front of the class. Several times this happened. And finally, my mom came in to see what is going on and to advocate for me. And as my mom looked around the room, she's like, "You called my daughter stupid and you've got misspellings on your walls? Let's talk about this." And, it was really a difficult year, and a difficult time. But what I learned from that, I learned from my mom how to be an advocate, and really how to advocate for a child, not, calling out mistakes, but she did a really good job advocating for me and talking about my strengths and really saying, okay, what are some things to look at here for my daughter? And I was smart enough, regardless of what my teacher said, I was smart enough to help myself learn how to read and learn things in different ways than other people were learning, because I couldn't learn in the exact same way because I'm dyslexic. But I'm smart enough to where nobody caught that. Despite the signs, despite the markers, nobody caught that. And so I spent the majority of my childhood teaching myself. in different ways, and finding out other ways to figure out how to problem solve what things said and how things actually were supposed to
For
be.
sure. Yeah.
So,
It's interesting you say that, because we have had, because we've asked this question for among educators and others around the country for several years now, and it is fascinating how there is a significant number of people who will say, I actually went into education because I experienced someone who was toxic, perhaps even cruel, mean, right? Didn't even like kids sometimes. And so I went into education because I was hoping to maybe keep some kids from experiencing some of that. Right. So it's a really interesting thing that you point out. It's not always positive responses that we get. And it's also important to note that as educators, our words last a long time. You're recalling, even with some emotion, something that a teacher said or did several years ago. Right? I mean,
decades ago. We're not going to say how many.
Right? But I can guarantee you there's emotion in your memories.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And, it's the writing on the wall. So everybody throughout your life, they say all kinds of different things to you, right? And it just adds to the wall behind you. I mean, obviously mine looks blank behind me, but in my head, like, there's all the different things that people have said about you, and obviously the negative ones kind of stand out more. And you really have to sort through all of that to really center yourself on, like, who am I and what is it that I want to bring forth from my wall? And I think that the great thing about having a teacher like that, she inspired me that it doesn't have to be that way. And education can be different. And I think that a huge part of my journey has been, how do we help all kids learn? And how do we make that possible for even a struggling teacher and a mediocre teacher? As leaders, how can we help them to get great results for kids, even when their bar may be not high enough? How do we help them raise that? How do we improve teachers? And I think it's, you learn from your terrible teachers just as well as your positive ones, just like with bosses. I mean, I don't know if you've ever had a terrible boss, but but I think that, we learn from great leaders, and we learn from the leaders that we're like, it doesn't have to be that way. And I don't want to be like that. And those things I think we need to hold on to and remember and say, okay, what is it that I want to be, and what is it I don't want to be?
For sure. So how did you first get started as an educator?
Well, I didn't go about it the same way most people probably did. I went the long way, So I started off, I was going to go into nursing, and then I was like, I started off on a transplant unit floor, and I got very upset because the hospital, to be left unnamed, was under renovation. So asbestos was being pulled out. People were dying. And I was like, I really think I just need to go to law school. This is probably where I'm called to be. I just got
from med school to law school.
Okay, yes. And then, I ended up getting a philosophy degree and minor in Japanese and other things, and decided, I'm going to run an independent music store. And so that's what I did. But then, you see, the iPod was invented. And I saw the future just disappeared before me, right before me. As soon as I had that iPod, I was like, there's no future here. No. But I had spent many years of my life teaching Sunday school and, and doing other things that, I was constantly called to education, but constantly avoiding it. And I did learn that God's going to have you where he's going to have you. And, and eventually, I couldn't deny the fact that I really should go into education.
Okay.
And I thought about, if I go into education, I don't have to be like the negative examples. I could be like the positive teachers I had, and I could really be there for all kids and figure out, how do we do this? So I went into education, and I started as a high school teacher.
Wow. Now that unorthodox sort of entryway to the profession is one that's way more common, and it is becoming more common, right? As we move forward, because there's a lot of people that do realize, I do have I do have a passion for this. I could do this. I know it's hard work, but I get to make a difference.
Yeah. And more
Be
people
part of
need
this.
to do that. This last Friday, I got to take part in a White House summit. And one of the things I said to them was, we really need from the White House and the government and media to stop talking about just hey, here's the safety concerns. Here's the low pay stuff. The government can actually do some stuff about that. They can help us with some of that. There are some real clear ways where we can be helpful on that. But
Advocating for the profession?
Advocating for the profession, yes. They talk about all these negative things, but they're not talking about teaching as a noble profession. And teaching is a very noble profession, and it's so rewarding. Even when you fail forward, you still have all the rewards. And we really need that to be part of the national dialogue, is that you can make a difference, and that's so important in life. And they're not doing that right now. So hopefully they'll listen.
So why were you at the White House again? What was the program?
So we were talking about how do we make schools more energy efficient and sustainable. Because right now, if you look at the schools across the U.S., some of them are struggling with air conditioning. I don't know how many people out there are kicking buckets, because of the roofs. They're not energy efficient. And also people don't realize that there's a ton of money out there for schools that nobody's claiming to really help improve all of our schools. And there are a lot of clear ways to get that funding. And we need to get that message out there. But we also need to realize that if you put energy efficient windows and roofs on your building, if you go to some of the electric vehicles, you actually save so much money as a school that if you can get government funds to help with the initial upfront cost, the sustainability is incredible. And the cost for maintenance,
there's ROI to it.
Yeah, the cost for maintenance and your electric bill and so forth, they dramatically go down to the point where you're constantly seeing savings year after year. And that's great for all of us, because no school has abundance of funding. So.
And you were there because of a school that you've designed in Indianapolis. You've been working there for the last several years, working to do a bit of a turnaround in a community that's really struggled educationally. I would say that I might call that an educational desert. I mean, there's some level, at least, of a quality of an educational experience that the families there really didn't have. And you brought to this a whole new design, not only academically, but also in the physical environment and the spaces and the quality of the buildings as well. Is that right?
Yeah. So in Indianapolis, I've been working on turning around and improving a school. And I don't know if you call it a school desert, an education desert, so much as like an opportunity and access desert. Parents haven't had the opportunities and access to move themselves forward, just like kids haven't. And so, what I've learned, I've spent over the last over 2 decades doing school improvement and turning around schools. And what I've learned is that you have to go in and you have to embrace the community. You can't be just putting up walls and saying, okay, we want walls and security guards, keep everybody out, and we're going to do our thing in here. And that's going to turn around the community, because it won't. Like, you actually have to welcome the community in. You have to find the community's strengths, what the community believes in, and really get to know them and build that relationship to know what are the needs and how can we actually help improve this community. And so the big thing that I did that brought me to the White House is learning from the community. They wanted me to launch a new high school. And when I talked to them about what it was that they actually wanted access to, they actually wanted CTE. And everybody had neglected career technical education for so long. The kids could ride the bus across the other side of the city to get it, but kids on the west side do not mix with kids on the east side. It's a thing. Gotcha. It's not going to happen.
Cultural realities.
Right. So we had to figure out, okay, so how do we bring this? How do we do a CTE school? But if we're going to do that, shouldn't it be in an energy efficient building? Shouldn't they be learning from a learnable building, and a building that can actually teach them, where systems are labeled and they can learn, how do I actually install solar and what does that mean? How can we do all these things that are more sustainable and have the kids be part of the upkeep of that even? so that they're learning and doing from ninth grade. We're bringing in virtual reality and AI in order to get them started in ninth grade, so they're not losing fingers and toes, but they're starting right off, because we can't just redesign just general education. We also have to redesign the education for those that are going to build the buildings of the future. And so that's what.
Well, it's interesting. I learned from one of the architects we work with at Metcalf and Associates. The building, the physical spaces, is actually the largest investment in technology, right? Because if you think of your building as technology, right, it can be very complementary to your curriculum, what you're saying, right, as well as to your culture. And if you design it right, then you get some really powerful benefits from that as you're trying to build an authentically and sustainably excellent school. Yeah. So one of the things you mentioned, I think, is really important is in accomplishing sort of those turnarounds. That I think one of the things that we learned even in our work together, working with what we were doing from school growth, contributing to some of those goals, was you really can't turn around a school without also bringing the community with you. And I think that's a vital thing, that a lot of efforts and a lot of investments being made into that space are really missing out on how it does require a much more comprehensive approach, because inevitably there is a homeostasis, right? There is a point where if you just advance the school and you don't advance the community will pull it back inevitably to a point of balance. And so I think it's a vital thing that you guys have done there, that it would be, I hope that becomes contagious to other investments in, especially in these urban communities where we're trying to see some significant turnarounds, even though there's been, I don't know, I hate to even think about how much money has been invested in this. The probability of a turnaround is extremely low, right? I mean, I think it's still less than 5%. And you've done it there in Indy, which is a real powerful story to tell. So as you're coaching, because I know you're moving into a role where you get to influence other education leaders and those that are really called to do that work. As you're coaching other education leaders, what's the best advice that you give them?
That's really interesting. So it depends on what the leader's facing, but mostly I try and convince them that you need to be coachable and you need to be a doer. Like, you can't let that fear of failure stop you from doing what's right and moving forward. As long as you're willing to move forward and be coached and work on not just getting stuck with a barrier, but how do we solve this problem, and pulling on your network to say, okay, how do I come together with the community and my network to really solve problems? Then you're going to be great. But you have to be able to fail forward. And that's what we do, because we're constantly learning. And that's what being a lifelong learner means.
Well, you've taken a lot of risks, and you're in using different technologies and trying new instructional strategies and expanding the reach of your community, right? So I can see where you've had to try some things. Wait a minute, are you saying that you failed?
Oh, constantly.
Yeah, I mean, that's almost an uncomfortable thing for educators to say, though, right?
Well, it's just like teachers. Teachers feel like they have to know everything, right? They can't have that student asking that question and they don't know the answer. So sometimes they'll make up the answer instead of going, you know what? I don't know. Let's look into this. Let's investigate this together, kids. They don't do that. But as leaders, we need to go, oh, that didn't work. Hey, team, let's come together. And how can we, strategize this? How can we make a plan to get this right? Because that was a good idea that just didn't work.
and listen, I think you're spot on with this in that there is a reluctancy for educators, one, to be able to try things and risk failure. I mean, there are consequences often that happen in that. And unfortunately, there's a lot of school boards and there's others that have a very low tolerance for some of these issues that we're all trying to figure out. I mean, there are things that we're dealing with, a combination of variables that it seems like it would be predictable when it's anything but. So I do think there's a couple of really important insights that you're sharing here. One is that we have to have a willingness to try things. And then when it doesn't work, pivot, right? Go to something else. And you probably learned that from your entrepreneurial background. I know I did. It's a lot of my work before, working in ed tech space and other areas that, you have to learn how to try things and to innovate. And then if it doesn't work, then you either try some variations or you go a different direction. Right? But the other thing you talked about was coachability. And it's interesting, isn't it, that our profession in education, that we've belittled and even demonized in some ways the idea of coaching. I don't know of any other profession where coaching is actually perceived as such a strong negative. Because if I say to you, Amy, as an educator, hey, Amy, I'm going to put you on a coaching plan.
Yeah, well, that's because we use that performance improvement plan like as such a negative thing, right? Like, oh, you're failing at your job, so we're gonna performance improvement plan you, and now you're gonna get coaching. No. Coach before. Like every other organization people get coaching and they get support and it's so critical to advancement and moving forward. We've got to do that mind shift and we've got to do the language shift. So maybe we need to call it something other than coaching, if that's got the negative connotation, like let's call it something else that everybody can go, oh yeah, so this is a good thing. This, working towards improvement doesn't mean that I'm going to lose my job, and saying, hey, I can improve what I'm doing doesn't mean that you're not still doing a good job. But, do we want to be good or do we want to be great?
Yeah. Oh, I know. We can call it an IEP.
Hey!
I mean, that's the idea, right? Is that I do think that every educator ought to have an IEP, right? An individualized education plan. Right?
Every kid should. Every educator should. Everybody should have their personalized learning and growth plan. Everyone should have that. Right. And, maybe if we just put everybody on a growth plan, then it'll get rid of the stigma because we should all be growing. So let's just do that. Everybody gets one.
I think everybody in the building ought to have an IEP. Yep. It's because it is a recognition of the commitment to lifelong learning, right? We all have opportunities to grow. We actually shared that in the Monday encouragement this week. It was the mirror doesn't lie, right? And it was this idea that getting feedback where our bodies are changing, our minds are changing. There is no real mastery of some of those content or other elements of knowledge. It's mastery of practice. It's mastery of habits.
Yep.
That's the advantage, right? And I can't believe that it's taken me this long in my life to learn some of that, but I'm really getting some. I share some of these messages because it's a discovery for me as well to go, oh wow, check that out, right? And so I get to, hey, let me share what I've learned, right? So that's a part of it. But
you can't look in the mirror and accurately see it yourself, and actually, Larry David said this well. So in the last season of Larry David's show, right? Curb Your Enthusiasm. It's the best season. You can skip all of the others. It was hilarious. But at one point, he's wearing these really funny glasses, right? Because he broken this lady stretched his glasses. He's wearing her glasses, right? So he looks really funny, and he goes, when you look in a mirror, you're seeing how you see yourself. But when you look at a picture, you're seeing how other people see you. And, it's that, not just that mirror, but the picture, like, hey, this is actually how the world sees you. Here you're caught. Because you know how you look at pictures and you go, ooh, that's that's a bad picture. When you hand somebody a phone to be like, hey, can you take our pictures? You're like, but take several so we can choose one.
I do it all the time.
All the time, because we want to capture, just that only right moment, right?
Because you can stand over here in front of me.
Yeah, we're not quite comfortable with actually how the world sees us. Right. And it's really important, though, as a leader, to have somebody else say, hey, here's how you're coming across, right? When you say things like that, here's how this is accepted, and to have somebody actually safely coach you through that, because it's not always comfortable, right? And it's not always going to be comfortable, but having somebody you can trust to be in that uncomfort with, to learn and to even practice how you're going to say things. Scott, we had a conversation with a leader just the other day, and you said, hey, this is how came across. And we actually sat, remember, with the leader, and she practiced like, hey, if I say it this way. And I was like, well, what if we try? And then I started, giving examples of here's how you can do this, because you can't figure it out all on your own, and you're not always going to be able to see how the world sees you, and you don't have somebody following you all the time taking those pictures to show you constantly. These are what you look like the majority of the moments.
Face the brutal facts. It's hard. I'm with you 100%. You're right. I hadn't thought about that, how the picture is a little bit different than the mirror. And so, but there's the idea, right, is going back to developing that self-awareness and in our research on the key intelligences of highly effective educators. The number one characteristic of high-performing educators are those who have a high degree and accurate self-awareness. That they know where they are, they know who they are, they know their strengths, they know their instincts. They don't know that just by guessing. They study, they learn, they have what you mentioned earlier, which was a curiosity. Right. I want to know. I want to know what that's like. And I recognize that everything's changing. It's not a fixed set of, body of knowledge. I'm constantly trying to tweak and improve and to grow. So I love that. I think it's very good advice. And I hope that, the educators that you're coaching, I think will benefit from a lot of that perspective as they're growing. Because, as you go into every school situation, like you said, every school's different. It has its own context, we call it, the story, the history, the families, the community that serves, characteristics, even in one city, like in Indianapolis or in Jacksonville, Florida, or other places, right? It's a completely different, narrative, right? So how do we build on our collective strengths? How do we develop an organizational genius? And so I love the coaching that you're doing in that. Hey, when you reflect back on, because you've worked in such a wide range of schools in Kentucky and Detroit, and New Jersey and Indianapolis and other places, right? What would you say is the achievement that you are, of which you're most proud, right? What's something that really kind of stands out to you? Yeah, that's a story I love to tell.
Oh gosh, there's so many kids that I'm so proud of. Just so many lives and so many parents. And, one of the things I think that I'm really proud of is in thinking about, individual community needs and meeting with community members to figure out what it is they need. One of the things that I figured out with our MLL learners, so our multi-language learners that come in and don't speak English, I realized that, we've been focused on how do we send things home in their native language, and how do we make sure we have somebody at the school that speaks their language, and then struggling with, okay, what's the right program to get those MLL kids to learn? Well, I took a different approach, and I'm actually kind of proud of it. Instead of just focusing on the kids, I started having 2 days a week English classes for the parents. Because if you're just working on the kids, especially in a high poverty community, and you're not bringing in the community, listening to their needs and getting the parents involved, then you're not getting there. We don't have to feed them, but we're teaching them English to help the parents get a job. But also, if the parents are learning English, they're going to practice English at home with their kids. So they're actually studying together, and they're learning together. So it's helping them as a family unit, but also helping them to learn English because their parents are learners and they're seeing that demonstrated. And far too often, especially in high poverty communities, you see parents working just so hard, and they're not showing kids as the example of, hey, but here's how you stop and be a learner and why that's important. So being able to do that and show kids that, I think, is one of the things I'm most proud of. I'd say the other thing is I always put into schools celebrations of learning. So people always told me, and you've actually even come and experienced it, but, people have always said that, well, in order to get parents to come to school, you've got to feed them. That's what you do. You feed them, especially in urban and high poverty communities. And I said, no, I don't think that's right. I don't think it's just feeding them. There's got to be another way. And so every year, like even in Indianapolis, like I've got over 600 parents and community members that come to every celebration of learning twice a year, over 600. And in fact, I think this last time was over 700. And how do I get them to show up? Every child has work displayed. that they can explain and they can talk about. Every child is doing something. And you know what? You know why parents come to schools? To be proud of their kids. Every parent, I don't care what demographic you're from, every parent wants to be proud of their kid and they want to see their kids work. And so if you're having a celebration of their child's learning, they're going to come. And I think we have to stop being afraid of inviting the community in and being communities. You know, the strength in the US and for all of us, it used to be because we invite people in and we are a community. You know, we looked after each other. We looked after kids, you know, and we've pulled apart so much to where, you know, if somebody knocks on your door, you're looking at your Ring camera and maybe you don't even open it, right? Somebody needs help. Do you actually open the door for them? Like, are we actually being the community that we're called to be? I don't think we are. And in schools, we have to open up the doors, stop being afraid of having the community come in, have them come in and feel joy and celebrate with you, because it's really the best feeling. And it's so good for kids and it's so good for the community. But being actually a community again, I think is something that schools need to bring back.
Well, and you've done a great job of that in your work, and that's why we wanted to celebrate you here on the Educators Among Us podcast. Is because you are, you know, you have done a great job of building relationships in the community, you know, and that requires being able to be that bridge builder that connects people who may not tend to do that, right? Maybe across different demographics or parts of the city, location, geographics, whatever, right? Kind of getting out from the excuses and
Right.
let's just do this, right? And that's, I think, this is a big part of what's energized a lot of your education leadership. But the other is being able to take on the risks.
Yeah.
I mean, there are risks in this. There are physical risks. There are social emotional risks. I mean, this doesn't come without consequences that we can't control. And you've been able to navigate, I think, a lot of those you know, even very threatening situations with wisdom and even with some, you know, a professional decorum that has enabled you to navigate through it and yet maintain your commitment and your energy and your focus. And I really commend you for that because you've been through a lot. And I know those are some really deep stories that you know, we'll share it at a later date together. But it is important to recognize that the work that you've done, especially in these urban communities, has made a difference. And we thank you for your commitment to that, not only for the kids, but also especially for the educators. Because one of the things that I admire about what you have done is that you do love educators and you do try to provide the best conditions for them to grow. Recognizing, of course, that, you know, we really don't control for student outcomes, but we do control for the quality of our people, for the quality of the curriculum and of the culture. And if we can focus on that, and that's, I think, is a big part of the whole coaching system that we've worked on together, is, man, that's control for the variables that you do control, and then be remarkable at that, right? Building your people, building the, you know, because in the end, our job is, and I know this sounds weird for some, but our job is not to educate kids.
Nope.
Our job is to provide the best conditions for them to grow and to be educated. They've got to make decisions. They've got to decide how they're going to respond to the opportunities. And I think that you've done a fantastic job in communities where they're coming from, you know, situations of a lot of trauma and a lot of challenging situations, and you've given them a place where they can thrive because you've created a team of remarkably gifted educators who know how to love each other and be their best. And so really just want to commend you on that.
Yeah, it's amazing how shocked one of my teachers was years ago when she was like, you know, can I just have more of your time? And of course you can have more of my time. Like, my job is giving you my time. And she goes, what do you mean I'm your job? And I was like, you and the development of teachers and staff, that's my job. And she was like, well, I've never heard that before. The kids are your job. No, you are in the classroom educating the kids. I need to be able to make sure you have everything you need to do that and all the supports around that. And that's my job.
That's powerful. I love that.
And it was just shocking. But it's so important to realize that is our job. And, we get stuck on well, I've invested so much in this person or this program, so we have to keep going this way. And that's the sunk cost fallacy? Like, we've got to get past that. Like, if they're not good for kids, they're not right in your building. You can't keep running around them duct taping. Like, we've got to actually really find people that love our kids so that we love on them, they love on our kids, and then it all comes together.
Well, listen, Amy, I'm just so thankful for you and your pursuit of authentic, sustainable excellence. It's been exciting to be a part of your journey, and looking forward to working with you and further, on the ongoing projects, what we're working on together, and doing some coaching and development of educators all around the world, and especially here in North America. So thank you again for your commitment to the work, to the calling of this noble calling that we call educator and education leadership, and just very thankful for your testimony and how you've lived it out. You've done what a lot of people talk about, but it's hard to deliver on. And I think you've accomplished some truly remarkable results. So thank you for your commitment to the work.
Thank you.
Educators Among Us is a part of what we do through Educators Fellowship, and Educators Fellowship it's edfellowship.org, and we love educators. We love pouring into their lives and giving them perspective and encouragement, and maybe even creating some conversations together and some community together to help be a part of their commitment to changing lives. And so I'd love for you to be a part of that, and maybe even to share kind of what we're doing here through the podcast, the other resources. Again, it's edfellowship.org. Thank you for being a part of this conversation, and we will look forward to talking to you soon. And remember, love them and lead them, my friend. This is Scott.
Thank you for joining us for the Educators Among Us podcast and for your courageous commitment to this noble calling. We get you and the challenges of this work. To stay connected with this community, be sure to subscribe to our podcast and weekly encouragement at educatorsamongus.com.